This is a case study for advanced periodization presented by Buvens and Dupre.
To introduce our athlete in sport, we chose to do a professional male powerlifter, age 24. He weighs 200 pounds. He's currently in the weight class of 205 range. Currently his 1 rep max for his squat is 690 pounds. For his bench press, it's 455 pounds. And then for his deadlift, it's 715 pounds. Currently, the athlete is suffering from a lower back injury. He pinched his nerve, so he'll attend physical therapy at first, and then this will help him correct this issue. So just to give a little overview of powerlifting, it's a competitive non-team sport. Just pretty much just test the strength of athletes through back squat, barbell bench press, and then deadlift. Each athlete gets 3 total attempts at each of the lifts to correctly lift the weight and as much weight as possible in these 3 lifts. The lifters are divided into groups, which are based on the body weight. And from this, the winner of each weight class is the person with the highest total combined. So ultimately, if somebody has a weaker bench press and has a stronger deadlift and squat, they can still win the event.
Alright, so the sport of powerlifting has some distinct physiological and biomechanical factors when compared to other sports. So for physiological factors, powerlifting pretty much just tests strength, which primarily uses anaerobic pathways, and really a very negligible amount of the energy used in the sport of powerlifting comes from aerobic pathways. So you'll see this later on in the presentation in our training program. We didn't really include any kind of aerobic training methods because you're not tested on them in the sport of powerlifting. It may help a little bit with recovery purposes, but all in all, it's not going to help the athlete be able to lift more weight. And so as far as biomechanical factors goes, the athlete will compete with a low bar back squat, but he's also going to train with a high bar back squat as well to kind of prevent some overtraining as well as take the load off of his lower back because he did have an injury. So most of the training at the beginning of the program will be high bar back squat, although he will compete in all 3 meets that we have him doing at a low bar back squat because he's able to lift. You're able to lift more with a low bar back squat because the moment arm at the hips is longer with a low bar back squat than it is with a high bar back squat. And as far as the sumo deadlift goes, or as far as deadlift goes, he will compete with a sumo deadlift, but he's also going to train with a conventional deadlift so as to not overtrain with that specific deadlift technique. And as far as bench press goes, there's not too many different variations of bench press that you would do for powerlifting. Although the more arch you have in your back when you're doing bench press, it will allow you to lift more weight because the bar does not have to travel as far, and you'll also be able to engage the lats more, which will also help to produce more force on the bench press.
So as discussed before, in the sport of powerlifting, it's mostly just squats, bench press, and deadlifts. That's what the athlete's basically trained on. So in this slide, you have your basic movement patterns. So in the first image, you have a low bar compared to a high bar squat. As you can tell, the positioning of the bar is completely different, which changes the moments of the hips as said before. In order to get this lift to count as a green light instead of a red light means that the lift did not count. The depth must be below parallel to the ground. So for proper bench press technique, you have 5 points of contact. Both your feet, your butt, your shoulder blades count as 1, and then your head. As said before as well, the arch is very important for powerlifting. The higher the arch, the less travel of the bar, meaning you can do a lot more weight in a shorter range of motion. And then the last image is a picture of a sumo deadlift in comparison with a conventional deadlift. So in order to get green lighted as well for this lift, the bar must be traveling at all times. It can be a grinded out rep, or, say for example, very slow and controlled. However, the bar must not be stopped. And then a second pull has to be moving at all times.
So this slide is going to talk about the testing and goals for our athlete. So testing for the athlete will be done in the form of 1 rep max testing, and that would be for the squat, bench press, and deadlift. These will be taken, the first one will be taken from the previous season. Those numbers are up, I believe, on the second slide of this PowerPoint. And also we'll retake those measurements at every meet. So the invitational meet, the national qualifying meet, and as well as the national meet. So the overall goal for the athlete is to be competing for first place at the upcoming national meet that he would like to compete in. So to do this, he needs to become injury-free. We'll do that through rehab. And he needs to increase his 1 rep max in all 3 of the lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift. And also, he would personally like to try and achieve a total equal to or greater than 2,000 pounds. And his current total, as it stands from the previous national meet, is 1,860 pounds.
So with the sport of powerlifting, there are a couple of injury risks presented with the sport. Most common injury sites we're going to say are the shoulders, the lower back, and the knees. These joints get used commonly almost day in and day out of training. This is why these sites are so common to attaining injuries. Most common types, I said, is muscle strains and tendonitis. Tendonitis is really a big injury risk in powerlifting. This is because these athletes train squat, bench, and deadlift 4 or 5 times, 3 to 4 or 5 times a week. This can provide a lot of tension on these joints just from constantly doing the same range of motion in an everyday lifestyle. Most of these injuries come from overtraining and improper technique. Some athletes, even whenever they're trying, even professional ones sometimes, can tend to have improper technique when going for new maxes. Sometimes you're trying to push that extra gear and your body's not capable of it, but these athletes will sometimes have a little improper technique trying to get these extra numbers to help get the end total to be a little bit higher. Overtraining is just a complication that comes with the sport. These athletes, I said, squat, bench, and deadlift 3, 4, 5 times a week.
So the macro cycle that we wrote for our athlete is a year-long cycle. And the goals of the macro cycle is to rehab the previous lower back injury, increase all max lift numbers, and to place within the top 3, preferably first at the national meet. So the majority of the exercise program will follow an undulating periodization scheme. And what this means is that the program's volume load will vary quite a bit throughout each microcycle and mesocycle. And the workout program will begin with the off season starting in the last week of May, and this will focus just on rest, active rest, and rehab of the lower back injury. And it will subsequently end after the nationals meet in the 3rd week of May the following year.
So as said in the previous slide, the postseason will begin at the end of May. This will last for about roughly 2 months. After this, the athlete will then transition into an off-season period, and this will also last roughly about 2 months. Next, he will transition into a preseason period for only 2 weeks to prepare for an invitational meet. This is because he's just coming off that rehab of his lower back injury, and this is just to get new baseline numbers. We didn't want to push it too hard due to that lower back injury, and he's also, the end goal was to do well at the national meet, which is at the end of May. So after this invitational, he'll have a week of active rest. This active rest will pretty much just be anything he could think of, as long as the athlete's not laying on his behind, being a big couch potato. This is pretty much anything he wants to do. So after this active rest period, there'll be about 2 more months of off-season training. So then we'll transition into a maintenance period. This maintenance period is to pretty much prep the athlete for preseason lifting. So after about 3 weeks of maintenance work, we'll then gear it up into some preseason work. This will be higher weights, and he'll slowly begin getting ready for that qualifier meet. A week before the qualifier meet, we'll do a preseason taper. This will be to give the athlete a little rest and also help him peak for his qualifying meet. After that, another week of active rest, and then we'll transition into 3 weeks of maintenance work. After this maintenance work, the athlete will then go into a month of preseason. The reason why we chose a month right here is because this is now for the Nationals meet. And after 4 weeks of preseason, we also gave him another taper. This is in order for the athlete to peak at Nationals and hopefully successfully do better than his previous lift numbers in totals.
Alright, so now I'm going to break down the mesocycle. So the goals of our mesocycles differ in between each one. So for our 2 off-season mesocycles, the goals of those are just to increase strength and hypertrophy. Now for our 2 in-season maintenance mesocycles, the goals there is just to maintain and preserve all the strength and hypertrophy gains seen from that off-season phase, and maybe even in some cases increase them a little bit. And so for preseason, that would be to prepare for competition, which would again be focusing on increasing strength, but also power. So that would be speed of the movement. And for the postseason mesocycle, that goal would be to just really focus on rest and recovery of the body, as well as any rehab that may need to be done. So in our case, that would be our athlete has a low back injury, so one goal for that would be to rehab that completely so he can get back to competing optimally. And so all the mesocycles will follow an undulating periodization scheme in order to best maximize the improvement seen in strength, hypertrophy, and power. The exception to this, though, we do have two exceptions, and that would be our meet prep weeks, which use a taper. Now, it's been shown in studies that a linear periodization scheme is better to ensure that the athlete is rested and prepared for each meet. And that goes for beginner athletes all the way up to elite professional athletes. And the specific taper that our athlete is going to use is going to be discussed in detail later. But just to mention it here, it's going to be an exponential taper.
All right. So as discussed before, our mesocycle will start off in the postseason at the end of May. This is pretty much just rehab due to his lower back injury. He'll be going to a physical therapist, as discussed before. So after about roughly 2 months of this, the athlete would then begin to take place into an off-season program. For the first month of this program, we'll put him under some hypertrophy work. This is to develop strength, just to make the muscles grow, get developed a little bit more after that rehab work. Then in the next transition, we'll transition into basic strength. This is just for more general strength of the body, pretty much to strengthen up any muscles, and then this will help transition into this preseason period where the strength and power is more specific to the sport. As discussed previously, this first preseason cycle is only 2 weeks due to him coming off a lower back injury and us just trying to get baseline numbers at the invitational meet. Then we'll go into an active rest. This is just light activity. If he wants to go play other sports outside of powerlifting, he's able to do that. If he wanted to just continue to lift light, he can do that. This is only for a week. Then we'll transition into 2 months we'll transition into 1 month of hypertrophy again. This is just for, as discussed before, to get that overall growth of the muscles and just get everything flowing. And then we'll transition into a basic strength period for a month and a week. So this is just to kind of prep his muscles, get some general strength in order to prepare for this in-season maintenance program for 3 weeks. In this in-season maintenance, we'll have some more sport-specific programs kind of to prep him for the following preseason program. In the preseason program for 3 weeks, this is ramped up, getting him ready for this qualifier meet. This preseason program will be the one that kind of helps establish and set everything for the qualifier meet. So then we'll give him that preseason taper. As discussed in the previous slide, it will be an exponential taper. So we'll give him a week off, and then he'll come back and hopefully peak, which is the planned peak for the qualifier. Then we'll transition to an active rest, light activity as discussed before. After this active rest week, we'll transition into another maintenance. This is just pretty much to help prepare the body for this long month of preseason training. So this month-long preseason program of the mesocycle will be very hard, very rough. This is just because his nationals meet is coming up. This will cost a lot of demand on the body. So we'll give him that exponential taper a week right before nationals. After this, the athlete will then peak and then hopefully, as said, get better overall numbers than his previous meets.
Okay, so now we're going to start talking about the microcycles. So the first microcycle is in that first block of the off-season that lasts 2 months. But the first part of that off-season is based on hypertrophy. So this microcycle is primarily focused on gaining size and as well as some strength benefits after the off-season and the rehab process. So basically just getting him back in the gym after some time off and some rehab. So with that being said, technique is going to be a very, very important focus point here, just to ensure that the athlete does not re-injure himself and is able to really just get proper technique and everything down with everything that was done over the off season. And this microcycle will last for a total of 4 weeks. So the rest periods here for hypertrophy, we're going to have them stay between 30 seconds and 1 minute of rest in between every set. And between different exercises, he'll wait about 1 to 2 minutes. And the frequency for this microcycle will be 4 days a week. And the volume load is 220 based on RPE and 0 based on percent of 1 rep max.
So the next microcycle in our program is one off-season basic strength. This microcycle will last for exactly 4 weeks. During this microcycle, the primary focus will be on building strength, just general strength, just in order to prepare him for what the season to come. So throughout this cycle, main thing will be the technique of the lifts. So he wanted to make sure the athlete is maintaining. If he has good technique, but if his technique's a little rough, make sure he's improving on this. So throughout this microcycle, the rest periods will be for about 1.5 to 3 minutes, kind of judging on how the athlete feels. If he feels a little more fatigued, exhausted, he can go to that 3-minute period. If he has a little more energy, he can do it for 1.5 minutes. This microcycle will consist of training 3 times per week. And then just an example of the workout that we put together. The athlete will begin with some barbell bench press, he'll then transition to some dumbbell shoulder press, followed by dumbbell bench press, then some lat pull down, some seated cable rows, and some tricep push down. As one can see, this one's a primarily upper body workout. So we pretty much included almost all the muscles in the upper body, the ones that more specifically transition into powerlifting specifically.
Alright, so the third microcycle breakdown is the first preseason. This cycle focuses on improving his 1 rep max on the squat, bench, and the deadlift, as well as getting him prepared for the invitational meet that he has coming up. So it's going to be more specific movements rather than general movements. So as you can see, we got squat and bench press in this glimpse of the workout. This microcycle is going to last 2 weeks, and as far as frequency goes, he's going to train for 3 times. So we got him doing squat, bench press, dumbbell Bulgarian split squat, barbell RDL, barbell incline bench press, and weighted dips. So these are more specific movements that are going to target strength, as well as just accessory. So all the accessory movements really target specific movement patterns in the lifts, like squat, bench press, and deadlift, and they're really good for helping to increase strength.
So the athlete at this invitational meet, he had to travel to New Orleans, located in Louisiana. So discussing his lower back injury, the athlete says he feels no pain or weaknesses during this meet related to this lower back injury. So obviously the rehab in the postseason helped him out very well. And then so he actually did make an improvement on his 1 rep max on the squat. He jumped up 10 pounds from his previous max. So now his max for squat is 700. For the bench press, he increased 10 pounds as well. So now it's at 465 pounds. His deadlift max stayed the same. This actually isn't a bad sign. Dealing with that lower back pain, he wasn't able to deadlift as much throughout this cycle. And for it to stay consistent is actually a really good sign. He ended up placing second in this meet with a total of 1,880 pounds. So after this meet, he's going to have a week of active rest. And then following the meet, a week of active rest after the meet before his training resumes again.
All right, so following that invitational meet and the week of active rest, he's going to begin his next microcycle, which will be the second hypertrophy cycle in the off season. So this microcycle's primary focus, again, is to work on technique and hypertrophy, while also slightly improving strength. And it's going to last for 4 weeks. So the rest periods here are going to be a minute to a minute and a half between sets. And that because of that, we are able to increase the volume load substantially here. And also the training frequency will go up to 3 days a week. So we have him still doing some specific movements like the deadlift. However, it's not the sumo deadlift that he's going to compete at. So we have him doing conventional deadlift. We have him doing pull-ups, front plate raises, dumbbell bicep curls, dumbbell lateral raises, cable rope curls. And this is to increase hypertrophy and strength throughout the entire body, and not just focus on specific areas that are worked by sumo deadlift, bench press, and low bar back squat. So this is going to focus more on the overall body as a system rather than just specific areas.
Alright, so the next microcycle will be another basic strength cycle. This one will last for about 5 total weeks. The goal of this one is to increase the overall strength of the athlete. So right here, you're just pretty much getting him prepared for his preseason work, just trying to get all his muscles stronger. So for this, the rest periods will be about 2 to 4 minutes, while the training frequency will only be about 3 days a week. So for an example of this workout, we did a little bit of low bar squat, which will help him transition into his preseason work. Then we did some hip thrusters, some dumbbell lunges, leg extensions, and Nordic curls. Right here we kept the volume of the exercises not relatively too high. This is because you're trying to develop that strength in the athlete.
So the next microcycle is in-season maintenance, and
Alright, so for our 7th microcycle, this is the second preseason phase. This one will be about 3 weeks long. In this microcycle, the main focus is getting the athlete ready for this national qualifier meet he has coming up. We will do this by fully optimizing his power and strength performance. Throughout this cycle, the rest periods will be about 3 to 5 minutes, kind of depending on the athlete as well. These rest periods are so long due to the fact that we want the athlete to fully focus on these lifts and fully develop the strength and power needed in these lifts, as well as giving his body the time to, refuel up in an aspect. The athlete would train for 4 days a week throughout this microcycle. So just an example of one workout of this microcycle, we have the sumo deadlift, we have some pin lay rows, some barbell bench press, weighted dips, neutral grip lat pull downs, dumbbell incline bench, and then straight arm rope pull downs. So we included some sumo deadlift and barbell bench press to directly correlate to the national qualifier meet. The reps and the volume loads are directly correlate to this as well, working up to 93% of his max. The pin lay row is to fully focus on that power aspect of his training. Pin lay row is a row performed off the ground, and the athlete will have to explosively pull the barbells to his chest. Then the weighted dips and the further exercises are just more to emphasize getting that strength to the athlete in order to do well at this national qualifier.
all right. So the next little microcycle that I'm going to talk about is the taper for the qualifying meet. So the athlete is going to use, as mentioned earlier in this presentation, the athlete's going to use an exponential taper for the qualifying meet. This kind of taper will keep the intensity as well as the frequency the same, but it's going to drop the volume load that the athlete's working with by 41 to 61%. And so what this is going to do is to really help the athlete get more rest and recovery from those preseason training cycles, which could be looked at as functional overreaching. So this is going to help to sort of help that athlete to recover. It's also going to give the athlete an idea of where they are going into the meet. So with that being said, the athlete is going to establish the opening lifts for the meet in the squat, bench, and deadlift. And also hopeful, outlines of progressions of each lift during the meet.
Alright, so now our athlete is competing at the national qualifying meet. This will take place in Houston, Texas. So, as discussed before, at these meets, the athlete will have 3 chances to optimize and get the best overall lift in the squat, bench press, and deadlift. So, in this meet, the athlete, his 1 rep max for squat was 705 pounds. His bench press was 470 pounds, and then his deadlift was 725 pounds. This gave him a total of 1,900 pounds, and that gave him a first place win. So that's very exciting. After this meet, the athlete will then take place in a week of active rest, which will help him fully transition into more training after that week of active rest.
All right, so the next microcycle is the second in-season maintenance phase. And this is kind of getting ready for the nationals meet. So this cycle will focus on preserving as well as increasing strength, power, and hypertrophy. And the rest periods for this cycle are 1 to 3 minutes in between sets, and the frequency for the cycle is 3 times a week. So as you'll notice, We have him doing a lot of heavy lifting as well as specific movements rather than general movements that you might see, and rather than general movements and a lower volume load that you might see in a maintenance phase. But because this is an undulating cycle, we have that ability to manipulate volume loads more often than in a linear periodization cycle. So this is also going to help to increase strength more than would just a straight linear cycle, which is why our volume load's so high, and it's also close. This would be a snapshot of a workout that's close to the next microcycle, which would be preseason training, which would help to focus more on strength. So this is kind of almost like a transition from maintenance to preseason training.
So the next microcycle we have is the third preseason microcycle. So during this microcycle, the primary goal and focus is to try to help the athlete get prepared for his national meet coming up. The duration of this is 4 weeks long. So in this program, we'll most likely try to maximize the strength and power of the athlete and his development in this. So the rest periods for this microcycle will be anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes. The reason for this, we want the athlete to fully recover between his sets in order to help establish and get his body back to baseline to help pull some of these higher lifts we have in this workout. This will consist of 4 days a week. So just to get a little look at this workout, so we'll start off with some sumo deadlifts. This will directly correlate and transition to his national meet. If you get a look at the reps and the sets, we end with a 3x2 at 95%, which is close to his max, which, like I said before, is close to national meet time and will directly correlate to that. Then we go to barbell bench press. We work up to 3x3 at 93%. And then following, we have reverse grip lat pull down, horizontal cable flies, weighted glute bridges, and T-bar rows. These are all exercises trying to help the athlete get stronger. We did some focus on the lat pull downs and the T-bar rows to help get his lat stronger in order to correlate to the bench press as well. And then at the end we have forearm curls. This is mainly to help get his grip strength stronger in order to pull heavier weights at heavier loads. We ended that with 3x8, and that's it for microcycle 9.
Alright, so the athlete will again use an exponential taper for the national meet. And as I said right before the qualifying meet, the volume load will be dropped by 41 to 61%, while keeping intensity and frequency relatively the same to help the athlete get a little bit more rest and recovery before the national meet, as well as to establish the opening lifts for the meet and to get a hopeful progression of how he should progress from those lifts. Although that will be seen more actually during meet time. So with this, the athlete hopes to place first in the national meet.
So finally, to end the whole program, the athlete will take place in the national meet. This took place in Nashville, Tennessee. At this meet, the athlete did perform better than his previous meet with a total of 1,940 pounds. Sadly, he took second place in his weight class. So in his squat, he ended up getting 720 pounds. On his bench press, he ended up getting 485 pounds. He did go for 500 pounds on his last lift, and sadly did come up short on that. And then we have his deadlift being 735 pounds. All in all, the athlete did progress thoroughly throughout this undulating progression and program. That's all we asked from him, and that's all.